right? So, again, we talked about the internet being full of data, but again, it's not reliable, and you need to have trustworthy, reliable network, people that you can lean on to navigate all that and pull out the best opportunities so that you can build more freedom, because that's what everybody wants, right? Who in this room doesn't want more freedom? Yes, there you go. Who in this room wants more freedom? Okay, good. You all get it then. Good. Then you're in the right place. You're in the right place. So, when it comes to real estate, there's a lot of novel ways of being a successful investor. Also understand that to be a successful investor, and it's in my book, the most recent book, the Spiritual Real Estate Investor's Bible, it's about benefiting and making sure that everybody that participates in those investments wins. Think about why that's important. Because in most places, and you go to most conferences, they'll talk to you about a win-lose situation. Whereas if you're, for example, the owner, the landlord, everything you can do to squeeze out the last penny out of those people renting. I think that that is a massive mistake. Because think about it. Why would you do that to somebody? Why would you overcharge them on the rent? Okay? They're not going to be happy campers. They're going to find out that they're overpaying. And even if you can take advantage of them right now, why would you? It's the wrong thing to do. Remember, the previous presenter talked about, Rod talked about why did they do their passion project and take it out further? Because it's the right thing to do. So you always want to make sure that every single time you offer an opportunity that everybody involved is benefiting. The investor, the board, the lender, the strategic alliances, the networker, the contractors, everybody. And everybody associated with you. Because when everybody wins, then when you have the next opportunity, who wants to participate? Everybody. It just makes sense. And just because this is a common sense approach, it doesn't mean that everybody practices it. It tends to be the opposite, okay? So you're never going to have us teaching or professing the opposite, where it's a win-lose. Never, no, we're not part of that. I don't want to be part of that. It's got to be a win-win. And not only that, when it's a win-win, you help each other, okay? So Jeff Belanger, we met years ago. I can't remember how many years now. A long time ago. 8, 10, something like that. quite some time ago, right? And I really loved what they were doing in terms of helping people get into the market that otherwise couldn't get into the market. So when you think about it, if we help others and we always have these types of networks, then we're going to be able, when there's a problem, understand, entrepreneurs are just dialed in to focus on finding resolutions to problems. Okay, and when we have the right network and we keep on building that network, then guess what? Collaboratively, we can help a lot more people, right, Jeff? Okay. And so your company has been around for decades now.
2005.
Yeah. And you've helped over 1,000 families, right?
We broke 1,200.
Broke 1,200.
Yeah.
That's right. Very good. So those are 1,200 families that otherwise would not have been able to participate in the market. And Jeff's going to explain how it's done, not just from an investor's perspective, but also people that we know in our network that can't own right now because of one reason or another, and Jeff will get into that. So without further ado, Jeff, take it away.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Peter. So HOS Financial, been around since 2005. We're known as the industry leader in rental. There is no other company even within 50% of our footprint. In fact, you'd have to take the next largest 4 RTO providers in order to get about 80% of what we've done, right? Our focus is on helping families. We say we're kind of laying a new path for home ownership. Traditionally, people want to buy, but they're going to run into problems, right? They're going to have lenders that are saying no, but the reason they say no are so scattered. It's different for every single family. And we'll talk a little bit about what distinguishes a family and why they come to HOS. But just to kind of set the stage, who am I? So I am now officially, as of February 2023, I'm the CEO of HOS Financial. I was a business solution consultant for some 20 plus years in the software industry, helping everything from large asset management companies and building up a really nice little bit of cash flow myself. So I said, hey, I'm gonna get rid of all my mutual funds. Back then I moved all my money to Western, I think it was called, and then over to Community Trust as a self-directed, right? And I started to try to invest RSP money through second mortgages. I went and bought a student rental and I sold it within a year after damages that were just overwhelming. I tried to flip and I realized I really wasn't that good at swinging hammers. I could swing it, but getting the end result to be favorable was never in my cards. And so I started digging into the rent-to-own side of things, and after 5 months of evaluation, I realized they were doing it all wrong. Because what Peter said, there was no win-win. There was no ethical approach to it. My first project actually defaulted. It was a lady who she was married, her second marriage, and she had 3 children. One of them was extremely sick. Her husband all of a sudden up and left one day. Didn't just leave her, but left the country. All of her savings and her ability to exit was now gone. She could not buy this home on her own. So I had a coach. Everybody's got coaches, right? People in their corner kind of watching their back, giving them the advice. I had a coach and he says it's real simple. Evict her. Get another family in there, keep her security. How many people could do that with a single mom with a deathly ill child? It wasn't me. So I looked for another solution. I found an investor who would help me out. We bought her the right home. Instead of having the best house on the street, the corner lot, the biggest lot, the hardwood floor, I bought her a townhome. I transferred all of her savings that she had built with me into that. Right? And that's an ethical approach. She's now well on her way to a path to home ownership. Right? Now, in order for her to fully afford it, her mom moved in, but mom needed a place to live anyway, right? And mom was downsizing, so there was a really good win. But it was a win-win, right? I felt good as an investor, and the client definitely favored well on her path. So I've been doing this a while. That was back in 2008 that I did that project. I took over partnership in 2016 with HOS Financial, and then this year officially becoming the CEO. That's not all that I do. I'm also on the board of directors for CAROP. Has anybody heard of CAROP? Yeah, a few people. So it stands for the Canadian Association of Rent-Owned Professionals. That was really nice to find because I realized that there are a lot of people out there like me that want to find an ethical solution to rent-to-own. So we got a lot of the like-minded individuals all together to create some boundaries, some guidelines, and some ethical approaches to how rent-to-own operates, right? And that's the CAROP. So I sit on the board of directors. There has been an HOS partner on that board for about 10 years now. Terry Heptich, if anybody knows Terry, right? I know there's a few that will know Terry a bit. He sat as the president, and right now one of our biggest competitors, this is what's cool about this. My biggest competitor is the president, and we work hand in hand, right? Fist in fist? No, hand in hand. To create some collaboration about how we can make this a more ethical industry. Just kind of walk you through what an overview of rent-to-own is, some statistics and so forth, how to make money, some of the investor plans, some next steps. So in general, the rent-to-own is really about contracts. Right, so we've got a family that needs help to purchase their home, and we're going to assist them by giving them an agreement between the landlord and them. Now, it's more than a lease. It's actually, with us, it's a future purchase and sale agreement. And here's something that's interesting. Finish this sentence for me. Hope is not a strategy, right? Hope is not a strategy. For me, the word option is also not a strategy. We don't want clients who come to us and say, I kind of maybe would think about, I might consider, maybe one day wanting to buy this home. No. From day one, we want people who are absolutely 100% committed to a path to home ownership. And we're going to help them on that path. So we're gonna do that with people who bring in a typical security of 5%. How many people have buy and holds? Okay, a buy and hold is typically what for your security? Maybe first and last month's rent, most likely. Maybe there's a little extra security or security deposit, but mostly it's first and last month's rent. We collect, on average, about 5%. I have several projects that are up to 20% down payment. So that's security for the investor, but it's their future down payment. So it gives us a little peace of mind as investors that we've got extra security, but they're building for their exit. Their model is to buy the house in a few years. Okay? So the tenants, they often will look for the home themselves. There are models out there that say, hey, we have a house and I'd like to turn it, I'll sell it to you in a rent-to-own. Well, that's called the property first model, and believe it or not, it has about a 70% failure. Right? You're asking these people to settle for what you have in inventory, as opposed to just go shopping. Who doesn't love to shop? Right? So we let them shop. So they'll find the home. We have a predefined term, 3, 4, or 5 years, and it's not just a number we pull out of a hat. This is a very analyzed number that comes out of realizing the details of all of their profile, their credit. It's not about credit score, it's about credit profile. There's more in the document than just a score at the top of the page. Right? The tenant will accumulate some security towards the future purchase. That means every month we are going to collect a little bit more money from the client and we're going to credit it back to them at the end. What is that? That's cash flow. The best thing about that cash flow is tax deferred cash flow, because you owe it. It's actually a liability, but you get to use the money in the meantime. Okay? Then there's the actual purchase at the end with a predefined date and price. Okay? So really, initial security, the purchase, they rent, buy, and they save for a period of 3, 4, 5 years, and then there's a transfer of title where they actually will own it. Okay? So, who is it? You know what? We've seen all walks. This generation, even just people getting out of university trying to buy houses. It's just impossible to get in the market. But typically, we see people that have bruised credit. They might be sitting in the 500, something the Beacon score, right? If you know the Beacon score thing, anything under 620, you pretty much don't have a chance to get a mortgage, right? They've got 5% down. We also see people who have good credit, but again, they have less than 5% down, right? So you're not gonna get, a bank mortgage. New to the country, self-employed, new to a career, not having any tenure at all, right? And of course, people who have bankruptcies and consumer proposal. And quite often you'll hear people call us and say, well, I'd really like to, but I already have a bankruptcy. That's okay. It's a problem, serious problem if you have 2, right? And it's even more serious if you happen to have a house that was in a mortgage and that was included in your bankruptcy, all of those types of things. But you don't know that from a credit score of 500, do you? No, you gotta look at the details, right? So all of these people come to us on a regular basis, hundreds of applications a month. And this is what's important to understand is I can't possibly be predatory, right? I'm not just gonna let everybody into my program, right? Because if I was predatory and I didn't care about the win-win and the ethical side of this, I could easily do 200 of these a month, right? It's just not the right thing to do, okay? Some big trends that we're seeing is parents helping their children, right? But believe it or not, they don't necessarily need rent-to-own. So it all depends on what those parents are providing, okay? So if the parents are just given 5%, the children may very well still need rent-to-own, right? If they're getting up into the 10%, they're going to find the lenders, right? They're going to find people who will pitch in. But there is a really, really big trend. I mean, I had that luxury, believe it or not. Back in 1997, my father-in-law helped me, right? And, it was a great thing. And, it's nice that, I'll be able to do that with my boys, although I'm pretty sure they're never leaving home. I have 4 teenage boys, And honestly, I tell you, do you guys know the story about one is fun? Have you ever heard this saying? One is fun, right? Two is three. Because now, you're right, all of a sudden they're a handful. Two of them are a handful. Three is 10. And now four, it's just outright war. 4 against 2 is not good odds for parents, right? But hey, we'll still help them. I'll help them. I'll give them as much help as they can take, right? To get out. Right? They're all getting up there in the age too, right? The youngest one 13, the oldest two are 18 and 19. Landlords selling to tenants. Big trend. Why are they doing it though? Right? Well, they're helping out their tenants. You get these long tenants who've been there, 5, 6, 7 or more years. We're finding that those landlords, well, the tenants want to buy. And the landlords have had their mortgage paid off for years, and they've seen this amazing appreciation. So they're actually selling the current property to their existing tenant and gifting them a little bit of security back so that they come into the program with 5% down. We've had several of those happen this year. And that got us talking about, wow, man, that's a really good thing to do. Think about this. If you have a buy and hold, and you got 2 or 3 or 4 of them, and you go to the bank and you say, hey, I have 4 buy and holds, I'd like to buy another one, and the bank says, you don't qualify anymore. Your GDR or your GSR or your debt ratios don't work, sorry, right? Here's the difference. A buy and hold debt ratio is about 0.92, right? If you're making a little bit of cash, you would be making 1.01, let's say, right? Maybe 1.02, right? That's just your income over your debts kind of ratio, right? Anybody want to take a guess what a rent own is? 1.3, 1.4. So imagine if you had a property, and it's because of the extra monthly savings. It's not that we're charging them outrageous number. It's the security becomes cash flow, right? And it's all about the cash flow. So imagine if you had 1 or 2 properties, you couldn't buy any more properties. So what you do is you actually sell, pull the equity, and buy 2 rent-to-owns with every 1 property that you own, because your GDS or GSR ratios or GDR ratios are so high. Okay, so that's a big trend where landlords are swapping. And then rescues and refis. COVID protected so many families from evictions and power of sale. And guess what's happened now? There is a tidal wave of opportunities. Because there's a lot of those lenders, in more cases the private lenders, but I'm even seeing it with Scotia and Royal, right, and National Bank, that are declining renewals from families while they're being orphaned, or they're being pushed into power of sale because they were where they were during the COVID crisis, right? Our rescues have tripled since January. So Peter says, Google's good for certain things, it's good for research, but it can't provide you these opportunities, right? These opportunities come from companies like us. Our whole job is to find families that want to create and have us establish some guidelines and guide them through, coach them, fix their budgeting, fix their credit, and so forth through a 3 to 5 year path to homeownership. Okay? And like I said, once you connect with us, you'll go through a series of stages with our investor team, kind of like a KYC. But it's not the typical exempt market dealer kind of stuff where we want to know all your details. We want to know what you're looking for. What kind of families do you want to help? Where do you want to work? What properties do you like? What you'll find is as you get to know us, geography doesn't become an issue anymore, right? I used to have this rule, I would never buy a property that was more than two hours from my front door in case I had to give away my weekend to run down there and solve a problem, right? Now I got properties everywhere from Kamloops to, I'm considering the one in St. John, but I haven't said yes yet, right? But I could be coast to coast, and that's okay, right? Tenants actually take care of all the details of the property. All right, some statistics. We've done over 1,200 programs. Every single one is focused on the client with 2 core values in mind, okay? And my team knows their job is on the line if they compromise on my core values. Number 1, exit. don't put anybody into the program that you can't get out, right? And I'll tell you why. Because my reputation, the reputation of me, the reputation of my company, and because I'm the biggest in the industry, the reputation of the industry of rent-to-own has nothing to do with contracts and signing paperwork. It's all about the exit. Did that client successfully get out and buy their home and get their dream of home ownership? That's why we do it. That's why we're doing this. So never ever compromise on an exit strategy. The second thing is balance. I'm an investor myself. I love high ROIs. I love cash flow, right? But should I compromise the family's affordability and the fact that the kids can't go to soccer, right? Because I want a little bit more cash flow. It's not very balanced, right? So we have to be compassionate to the family's affordability. Okay, so that's core values. We've done over $480 million in asset value. And we're about 92% on our rent collection, right? So that means that our investors are getting paid, right? And it's pretty simple when I deal with my clients. I'm not dealing with renters. I'm dealing with future home buyers. They have 5% on the line if they're not paying. You think of a client who's just renting, right? Good Lord, if it's 5 to 7 months. Anybody dealing with anything in the landlord-tenant board right now? At least 5 months, right? But I go to a client and say, listen, you risk losing your 5%. On a $500,000 property, that's $25,000 they have on the line if they're not paying their bill, okay? So we don't have a lot of defaults because of that. Skin in the game, we call it, right? 95% success. Our purchase files, these are dedicated people looking to buy and get on a path, and there's sure success, right, when they are coached. If you don't have a facilitation company that is properly vetting them and working with them through the term, you will see failures. I'm going to give you an example. I have one investor about 5 years ago came to me, and he was complaining about rent-to-own. He loved the strategy. He loved helping these families, but he found it way too much work. He couldn't give them the attention they needed, and he had a 70% failure on his rent-to-owns. Okay, failure. He's now 90% success. He has 21 properties with me. One investor, 21 properties. Right? Okay? So what makes sense? So our team is expertise. Anybody know Guy Liu? We call him the grandfather of RTO. He's not really that old. He's about 64, right? But he started HOS in 2005. Him and Loeffler were partners at the time, and they built and they wrote the book about RTO. All right, so we've got years and years of expertise. We have extensive vetting. It's our team of underwriters, and I know in Orlando, you even do some underwriting. You've done some underwriting for us in the past as well, right? So getting into the details to understand the dynamics of a family. It's more than just a number, remember that, right? Make sure that we have higher monthly cash flow. We're going to make sure we're delivering that. That's why people are coming to us. It's passive income. We're managing the entire process for you. The structured path to home ownership is for the family, right? Again, we're an ethical approach. In fact, I'm working on a golf ad right now. Yeah, I'll have to throw some taglines out, and you guys tell me which one you like better. I said, if rent-to-own is an ethical investment and it has high cash flow, is it a fair way to raise cash flow? And get it fair way. It's golf. I got a whole bunch of them, but all right. Tenants make improvements, right? Remember that. When you're a buy and hold investor, you are responsible for the property, and I don't want you to dismiss the fact that there are legal, landlord-tenant board has to come into play here, even if it is rent-to-own, okay? Don't let anybody ever tell you that it doesn't, okay? But the tenants are responsible for the improvements. right? They are not just tenants, they have a future purchase and sale agreement that commits them to buying this property, right? So with that becomes some additional obligations. But as an investor, if the furnace breaks down in mid-November, would you let them freeze if they didn't have the money? No, right? We jump in there, would we maybe raise their purchase price at the end? Would we maybe implement a prom note type of strategy so that they could pay you back monthly with interest, right? The clients want to solve the problem. They'll go out there and say, hey, I went to Reliance and they're going to give me a furnace and they'll have it installed in 2 days. And when you look at the payment plan, it's going to cost them $9,000 for a $4,200 furnace. I think we can do it cheaper than Reliance. We'll let Reliance, we'll have the investor jump in, put a little bit of capital. So we have to do those kinds of things as investors. It's not just to protect the family, it's to protect our asset, right? Our investment, right? Peace of mind on the maintenance, that's what that is. Client services, reaching out to my team, we're always there to help. My job has transitioned very much over the last year or so that all I do is solve problems, right? Whether it's an insurance claim, whether it's the husband had a heart attack, right? All of these things come in, and you don't want to leave this family high and dry. So my role, Terry as well, really dive into how can we solve and what's the best win strategy that we can re-implement when there are problems, right? We don't believe in vacancies. I have a client right now that's, I'll ask you this before I tell you. Can you guess what the number one reason for default is in rent home? Anybody want to guess anything?
Sickness?
Nope. Breakup. Divorces. I got 3 of them happening, right? And in most cases, the unethical investor would say, oh, well, I got your security deposit, right? If you're both not living there and you're both not contributing to the rent, guess what? You're gonna default. And I'll just kick you out. And I'll keep your deed, right? Not me. I look for a strategy to get a win-win. From my perspective, as long as I get my investment back with my expected ROI, I have no reason to start dipping into this family's deep pockets, right? That aren't so deep because they're gonna lose probably $60,000 in legal fees just going through a divorce, right? I don't sleep well with that type of mentality, all right? So I look for solutions. So we are the only rent-own company that will allow, as long as there's no default, as long as you're in good standing, why wouldn't I work with you to put the house on the market, sell the property, and maybe we take the money for commissions and real estate and all of that from your security. And that's normally where it would stop. But then I'm going to say, if I sell the house more than what you're supposed to buy it at, I'll share the profit back with you. 50-50. Because I will make my money, right? And one of the strategies when we're doing underwriting is making sure that we're not overcharging the client, the balance and the exit. A big portion of that is understanding how to play with the appreciation, right? It's easy to charge 7%, sometimes 8%. Heck, we could have been putting 23% on the charts last year, right? But we weren't. We were using 3 to 5%. And with the 3 to 5%, investors can still make 26% average annual return. Every single file of mine is written that way to give the investors a 26% average return. I don't do it as joint ventures. I do it as a managed service. Trust in me, my service, and my expertise, right? The JV model, just so you know, there are lots of them out there that you rent to own. The JV model is a 50-50 split. When you break it all down, first of all, they're charging, on a $500,000 home, they're charging about $400 more a month than I am. And believe it or not, your rate of return is somewhere between 12 and 14% because you're splitting everything with the other facilitators. Okay, I'll get you 26%, and that's my fees totally all included. Okay? All right, so different ways to invest. The 26 Plus is our elite plan. That gives you, access to our concierge. Her name is Lori, and if you don't know Lori, you'll get to know to love her. right? She is just the most kind-hearted lady that you'll ever meet, right? I think she also sits on the board of director of 3 churches, and I mean, she is just a people person. She's a mortgage broker, and she's going to work hard to help you find mortgages if you need it as an investor, but also to find the right plan. But in an ROI 26 Elite plan, you got to qualify for a mortgage. So it's your mortgage, it's your title, it's just going to be managed by us. Okay? That means you need to have all the closing costs, and then we'll give you, after our fees, we'll give you the net back from the client's input. Security, okay? Partnerships, LPs and so forth. We're doing a lot of this kind of stuff. You know, get 2 guys together, they have $500,000 each, comes $1 million, all of a sudden we're working on a GP LP structure where we're managing 8 properties for them. Okay? That gives it anywhere between a 12 and 15% return. And again, it's passive. In that one there, instead of owning the property outright, it's the corporation, the GP that owns it with a bare trust to the LP. And you're getting, you know, there's not a lot of cash flow in that, because in order to qualify that, you're commercial lending at that time. And the key in there is to make sure that you're getting the DSRs. So if I pay it all out in cash flow and returns immediately every single month, right, you won't get the mortgages. The last one is the Dwell Trust. This, you know, pretty proud of this. It's been 6 years and $160,000 in the making. Everybody says, hey, raise money, right? The OPM, right? You know, how do you raise money in this world? Well, first of all, be careful of OSC, right? You just can't go out and raise capital like you used to. So be very careful about that. So we went to an exempt market dealer. We created an OM and a product. We got a company called Dwell. It's Dwell Home Ownership Trust. And in there, our GP is called D&H. It's Dwell and HOS Financial. So I'm the owner of all 3 of these companies. And we're raising capital, and we're raising RRSP funds to help families on their rent-to-own home ownership, path to home ownership. Right? That pays 12%. Right? And again, it is RRSP eligible. Quick little scenario. This is the 26%, the 4 stages of an initiate, purchase, manage, and sell. Okay? So I'll do this really fast. The $500,000 purchase in this example, again, we'll do the vetting, the due diligence. We'll share that with you so you have full details of everything that you need. We're going to look for affordability and exit being paramount, never compromise. Path to home ownership, all clients will be engaged in that credit coaching and mentoring. The investor will qualify for the mortgage, and it's typically a 3 to 5 year term, so this is a 4-year term of $500,000. You'll be a title. The investor will be title. The investor will do the mortgage. The investor will have the equity. Closing costs of about $109,000. The net investment will be about $95,000 because there's a 5% security, and then there's the HOS fees worked in there. Onto the manage. So throughout that 4-year term, it's $34.60. And you might be thinking, a $500,000 property rent is $34.60. I always said rent-own is not cheap. Well, in today's market, the rent rates are driven by these mortgage rates. We have the luxury of brand new properties and brand new leases, so we don't have the landlord-tenant board issues for when we set this price. But here's what's interesting. Any idea if somebody had less than 5% down on a home and a 560 beacon score, what do you think their mortgage rate would be? Orlando, what do you think?
9-10%.
Plus fees.
Yeah.
Right? So 12 to 14. I have a private lender that, was working on a project with me, and he offered me 14 plus 3. My jaw went through the floor. I'm like, okay, well, we can always meet for coffee someday. You're paying, right? Believe it or not, that's not unquestionable. People are actually paying 12% interest, 9 plus 3% in fees every year. And when they're with these private lenders, that's exactly what happens, right? And there's glass ceilings. $34.60 a month in base rent in this model is equivalent to a 6.85% interest-only mortgage. That's pretty good for someone with 500 beacon score and only 5% down. Okay? It's not about rent anymore. It's about path to home ownership. And there are some sacrifices that the family will have to do, but we never compromise on affordability. TDS ratio, never more than 45%. There's banks out there right now getting up to 55 and 60. Crazy. You know what that says? You yell something to me. Increase in business because they're going to come to me for a rescue refi in a few years when they've defaulted. Right? High interest and then all the fees, right? And doing it to a TDS ratio of 60% of their gross income. It's terrible, terrible what's happening. You have a question? Yeah.
Yeah, what kind of income do they need to qualify for that payment?
Yeah, so this is probably about $120,000 a year. But there's a caveat. What if they have debt? Debt has to be added in there. So if they're paying an extra $1,000 a month for that BMW, right? That's got to be added in there as well. So that's another $12,000 a year. So you have to consider their debt as well. And that's part of our underwriter's job. Okay, great question. All right, so the 860 is additional cash flow for the investor, but that's savings. We're going to credit that back to the end, working them up to about a 10% down payment at the end of the 4-year term. So we're going to take care of the rent collection. We're going to manage the tenant and coach them and budget them. And if they run into trouble, we will pull it back and we will get them down to paying weekly, right? It's amazing the kind of workload that comes into my team and the effort that goes in to make sure that these people are paying on time. The cash on cash ratio, do you understand what cash on cash means? It's the real money of your net investment per month. But that's a yearly number, 12%. So it's about 1% of your net investment. And if you do the math, net 95, cash flow, it's about 1%. Okay? All right, so the last thing we have to do, so you're making cash flow of almost $1,000 a month. And we're gonna sell the property at the end of the term. So throughout the term, about every quarter, we have appointments with these clients, checking their credit. There's a lot of people that just make silly mistakes coming to the end. I had a client that, he was coming up, it was 6 months left, and I said, hey, let's meet for lunch. I was in Kitchener for the day, let's meet for lunch. And he goes, all right, so he pulls up in a brand new Lincoln Navigator and then couldn't get a mortgage because his ratios were off, right? So again, ethical, what do we do? Pull my team together, what are some of the options? Believe it or not, we had his dad take over the lease on his Lincoln Navigator. It cost him about $1,800 to do the transition of the lease, but he changed the name and put it in his dad's name to get it off his books, right? So that he could actually get the mortgage. But people make silly mistakes, right? So we touch base with them quarterly, and about 6 months before their program ends, we are on them about how to get a mortgage, right? We're starting to work with them right away. Okay, and sometimes if you're a mortgage broker, Orlando, you'll know, you did one this week for us. We take that client and say, all right, here, Orlando, can you get this guy a mortgage? Right, so we'll use our network, our professional network, to get these clients mortgages. Right, so the average ROI there, $99,000 is a return, 26% return. Let's look at what this means, because I love cash flow. How many people would if you have the capital to do this, even yourself, or I've seen people do this with their brothers. I have a gentleman named Greg, and he actually has set up a family trust, and all of the brothers go in together. 2 of them are pilots, and one's an accountant. They have great jobs, so they put money into the trust and they buy the properties through the trust. And this is what the kind of stuff they're looking at. Let's buy one, right? And see what the cash flow is. So it's $11,000 a year in cash flow. Okay? And at the end, you get your $53,000 for the transfer of profit. So you transfer it, you now don't own it, you got your check from your lawyer for your initial investment plus the additional $53,000. Okay? Yeah?
If someone already has a conventional mortgage through the bank or wherever, can they do something like this?
So you own a property, you have a mortgage.
I don't.
Okay.
I have a mortgage, I own a property, but I don't have a mortgage. I'm trying to put, one of my neighbors, for example,
Yeah.
had a marriage split, and now he's got a house, and she's got her house, she got paid out by him and
Yeah,
had to go get a mortgage.
yeah.
I'm thinking, is there a way that he could flip his mortgage and go to something like this?
Yeah, so that's the rescue and the refi model. Quite often, that's kind of the scenario that comes in. So what happens is we look at the full valuation of that consumer's asset, the house, what it's worth, we get appraisals on it. And then we do an evaluation of their total debt. So both the mortgage and their consumer debt. Because if we're gonna do this, we only want to ever do it once, right? No, I say it all the time to clients. I'm not being mean, but I hope to never see you again. Right? I'm gonna get you on your path, you're gonna be the homeowner, and that's it. Okay, if you come back in a few years as an investor, fantastic. But the rescue model, we would evaluate that. And by buying it, I mean, when there's refis and foreclosures involved in real estate, the natural tendency for investors is to buy it cheap, right? Buy the debt and kick them out. I don't sleep at night, right? I save families, right? I have had many situations exactly like this where, last year, 3 days before Christmas, I saved a family from eviction. I mean, that's heartwarming, right? So this person that needs it, they would sell the house to our investor. We would buy it at market value, right? We would take as much security as we can and put it towards his future down payment. Take any extra equity, pay off all his consumer debts, and it's kind of like a full reset of the compass. And then from there, he's going to rent it typically for 3, 4, 5 years, typically 5 years on a rescue. And then in 5 years, he's got a predefined price to buy it back. And they typically have pretty close to 20% down. And they can get a conventional uninsured mortgage at that point. Okay? Yeah, Orlando?
Do you guys allow real estate investors to use the rent-to-own strategy to acquire more property? Or is it
Yeah,
designed for?
It's not out of question, but not recommended in a rental home. And, it's because it is very much subletting. I think it gets pretty messy. We've had 1 or 2 that have, they'll fare and they'll weigh out, but not traditionally something that we allow. We want skin in the game, right? And the person who is in the property is the owner in our minds, that tenant, right? Where in that scenario, it's just going to be a regular tenant, right? Now, our investors typically own it, right? So if a real estate agent says, hey, I'd really like to buy another real estate investment property, but I can't qualify for a mortgage, right? I'm guessing they have the capital. Maybe they want a joint venture with us instead. Let us get the mortgage, do a joint venture, they provide the capital, and together we work on our rental home.
Yeah, because my thinking behind that is, a lot of investors, they can't qualify for income, right, based on their portfolio.
Yeah.
Right, and, this could be a strategy for them to acquire property while they wait.
Yeah. So the LP structure works best for that. LP, which is similar in nature to a JP, it's just different paperwork. The concepts are generally the same, right? That's how we've handled them in the past. But the person who's buying the house is the investor. The person who will ultimately own it is the tenant that's in there, who supplied the initial security, who pays the extra $800 a month, right, for the rights to buy this house in the future, right? We want that tenant to be a future buyer, not just a typical tenant. Okay? All right, so there's your profit over 4 years again, same number, 99,000. The real value in this comes when you start to add them together. So every year buy one. All right, you want to buy one every month? I'm not going to stop you, right? But we have to look at capacity, right? So buy one every year. So year 1, you got your 11,000, right? Year 2, you're up to 23,000 in cash flow. Year 4, year 3 is 34, 46. At the end of year 4, you're now selling one and you're buying another one, right? Right? So you're actually making about $8,000 a month in rental cash flow with that scenario, or earnings. Okay? I mean, that would, I'll tell you, Virginia, it's my lady, right? I mean, this is where we are. It's like, you know what? If I do that 1 or 2 more times, right? didn't work, right? So that's the big push, is to be able to leverage these things, build the wealth, have multiple projects, and every year, it's just one transaction every year. You're buying and selling, one a year. Simple as that. And you can be seeing, upwards of $8,000 a month in passive income. And truly is passive. I mean, we're doing all the work for you, right?
What's your fee for it?
Sorry?
What's your fee for it?
All right, so there are 3 fees worked into our program, all included in the 26% return. Okay, it's all encompassed in. The first fee is what we call a tenant locator fee, and it's typically on average about 2% of the purchase price. Then we charge $250 a month, but it's added into the client's rent. It's kind of like saying they're paying a broker fee, but instead of asking them for the full broker fee up front, we work it into their monthly payment so that they're paying us. We collect it with the rent, it's part of the rent payment, and then send the investors their net difference, right? So it's $250. So that comes from the client. And then at the very end, there's a 1% exit fee where we help you with the transition to sell it privately. Okay? A few key emails, real simple. They're all hosfinancial.com. 3 ways to get in touch with us the best way, right? Jeff, that's me. Mark, okay, that's Mark does a lot of the information related to the trust and the LPs. If that's the kind of stuff you're interested in, you can email either one of us. And then if you're really interested in, hey, I'd like to see some sample opportunities, can you send me the next 3 jobs so I can take a look at a full pro forma? And can you now teach me how to read this pro forma, right? Then you want to send it to concierge at HOS Financial. That's a tough word to spell sometimes, so just remember I before ye, except after C, except after, unless it's in concierge. I don't know if you ever pick up on that, but yeah. So concierge at hosfinancial.com is a great way. But you also have my cell phone number there. I do about, and feel free to text that cell phone. If you got, say, hey Jeff, can we connect? You're better off to text me than to call and leave a voicemail. I do over close to 5,000 minutes a month on my phone. Right? Thank goodness for headsets, right? Mark's fairly new to our team, but he's got years and years of capital funding raising, development. He's big part of a big 400 unit old age home retirement complex up in Barrie right now, 400 units there. But he was part of the core advisory group, if you know them, and recently left them to join HOS full time as a partner in HOS. And he's the reason why we officially have that dwell set up now, to raise the money through RSPs. Any other questions for me? Yeah.
Quick question, who are the people you mentioned that they started the office?
Sorry, who are the people
You
who?
mentioned two names who started the office.
Mark Loeffler was 2003 as rent to own, so you probably find his book up there. Still up there. It's pretty old now, right? It's 20 years old, but he's kind of one of the grandfathers. The other guy is Guy Liu. And you can reach Guy. So Guy is a mortgage agent, mortgage architect, I think he's with still. And he's been a mortgage agent for probably about 18 years. He does a lot of really weird kind of, hey, I want to finance a gas station. Of us, right? Just using our first name at hosfinancial.com. Okay. Clear as mud? All right. Well, I can talk about this stuff for hours, but no, Peter's kind of said I haven't time yet. So hopefully we've done okay with the time there, Peter.
Yeah.
All right.
Sounds good.
Okay, thanks for having me.
Yeah.